All right, let's talk about a system that's designed to take all the risk out of one of the most nerve-wracking parts of marketing, testing new ads. We're going to walk through something called the Sequential MVT Framework. It's a method that basically promises to get rid of the financial gamble and make sure you're only putting your big money behind proven winners. Let's dive in. You know, most marketers, whether they admit it or not, treat A/B testing like they're at a casino. They're risking their entire budget on an idea that's totally unproven. But what if there was a simple trick that could take all that financial risk off the table and absolutely guarantee you only scale the winners? That one question kind of flips the script on everything we've been taught. We've been told over and over that to get good, reliable data, you have to spend big. And that belief, it pushes us into a really tough spot, where every new test feels like you're betting the company's money on a single roll of the dice. But here's the thing. What if that whole belief is just wrong? What if the problem isn't how much you spend, but the way you're spending it? So this really boils down to two totally different ways of thinking. On one side, you've got the gambler. And this is the default for so many of us, right? It's an all or nothing game. You throw a huge chunk of your budget at a bunch of different ad variations and just cross your fingers hoping for a hit. It's stressful, it's inefficient, and honestly, it's super dangerous financially. But then on the other side, you've got the scientist. This approach sees ad testing not as a gamble, but as a controlled experiment. Here, the main goal isn't just finding a winner, it's protecting your money first and foremost. It's methodical, it's driven by data, and it's built to make sure that only the stuff that's proven to work ever gets a big budget. And today, we're going to show you exactly how to leave the casino behind and step into the lab for good. So, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll really dig into the marketer's gamble and the ad spend crisis that makes a new way of thinking so essential. Then, we'll get into the framework itself, the riskless testing framework. After that, we'll look at the psychology of why it's so effective, lay out the absolute must-follow rules for making it work, and finally, we'll totally reframe how you think about testing, not as a risk, but as the best financial protection you have. Okay, so let's jump right into section 1, the marketer's gamble. The whole reason this gamble exists is because of this huge paradox. This fundamental misunderstanding about how you get solid data without, betting the entire farm. It's a trap so many people fall into. And here's that paradox in a nutshell. The big illusion is that you need to spend a ton of money to figure out what works. So what do? We launch a dozen different ads with different headlines, images, copy, pour a ton of cash into it, and just hope the algorithm figures it out for us. But the truth is, that whole approach is broken. A chaotic test with a big budget doesn't give you clean data. It just gives you a big, expensive mess of data. Sure, you might get a winner, but you'll have absolutely no idea why it won. But on the flip side, a disciplined, controlled test with a small budget, that can give you crystal clear insights you can actually use. The problem was never the budget size. It's always been the method you use to get the data. And this broken methodology is being made so much worse by a massive shift happening right now in digital ads. Which brings us to section 2, the ad spend crisis. This is all about why protecting your budget, what we call capital preservation, isn't just a good idea anymore. It's non-negotiable if you want to survive. No, I'm sure every single marketer watching this feels this in their bones. The cost to get a new customer, your CAC, it has just been climbing and climbing on pretty much every platform out there. A few years back, you could afford a little waste. Clicks were cheap, a failed test was, no big deal. But today, with costs this high, every single dollar matters. Wasting a few $1,000s on a failed test isn't a learning experience anymore. It's a real hit to your bottom line. This rising cost has made the gambler's approach just totally unsustainable. The margin for error is gone. And all this financial pressure brings up a huge psychological roadblock: loss aversion. This is a classic idea from behavioral economics, and it's simple. For most of us, the pain of losing something feels about twice as strong as the pleasure of gaining that same thing. So for a marketer, the fear of losing $10,000 on a bad test is way more powerful than the excitement of making $10,000 on a good one. And that fear, it's paralyzing. It stops teams from trying bold new ideas. Instead, they just make tiny little tweaks that almost never lead to a real breakthrough. So what do we do? How do we get past this intense financial pressure and this deep-seated fear? We need a new system. And that brings us to section 3, the heart of this whole thing, the riskless framework. This is where we take the cold, hard logic of the scientific method and apply it to the very emotional, high-stakes world of buying ads. Okay, the first rule of this framework is completely non-negotiable: variable isolation. This is the foundation of any real science experiment. It just means you only test one big thing at a time. So if you want to know which headline works better, everything else about the ad, the image, the copy, the call to action, has to be exactly the same. The second you change both the headline and the image in the same test, you've completely ruined your results. You'll never know for sure what made the difference. By isolating just one variable, you get clean, reliable data. You know exactly what worked, and more importantly, why it worked. And this second pillar, this is the financial game changer that makes the whole thing riskless. It's called budget staging. Think of it as your financial safety net. Instead of betting your whole campaign budget on a new test, you only commit a small, defined slice, usually just 10 or 20%, to the experiment. That small budget isn't a gamble. It's the price of admission. It's a calculated investment you're making to get good data. By staging the budget like this, you put a hard cap on your maximum possible loss. The worst thing that can happen isn't a disaster anymore. It's just a small, affordable lesson that keeps most of your money safe. So let's see how these pieces all fit together in a simple 4-step process. Step 1, you isolate the variable to make sure your data is clean. Step 2, you stage the budget to protect your capital. Step 3, and this is crucial, you validate the result by letting the test run long enough to be statistically significant, proving it wasn't just a fluke. And then finally, only after you have that validation, you execute the winner-take-all rule, and you aggressively move the rest of your budget, that other 80 to 90%, over to that single proven winner. That's the whole framework right there.
So we've got the how. Now let's dig into the why this works so well on a human psychological level. Let's move into section 4. This framework isn't just about money, it's a behavioral strategy built specifically to get rid of that fear of loss that holds so many of us back.
And this visual just says it all, doesn't it? Look at that chart. That tiny 10% slice, that's your test budget. That is the absolute maximum amount of money at risk. The huge 90% chunk is your protected scale budget, just sitting there, safe and sound, waiting for you to find a proven winner to pour it into. When you frame the decision this way, either to yourself or to your boss, that fear of loss it evaporates. You're not asking to gamble the whole pot anymore. You're just asking to make a tiny, smart investment to unlock the massive potential of the rest of your money. It turns a scary decision into a low-risk, high-reward opportunity to learn. And there's another huge psychological win here. It's called cognitive load reduction. Basically, it just makes your life easier. When you test 10 different combinations of headlines and images all at once, you're creating an analytical nightmare. You're left staring at this massive spreadsheet, drowning in numbers, trying to guess what worked. It just leads to confusion, to analysis paralysis. But by testing just one thing at a time, this framework makes the decision process dead simple. The results are clear. A beat B, period. The simplicity frees up your brain power, and it lets you make faster, way more confident decisions. Okay, so we get the theory, we get the psychology. Now let's get super practical. Section 5 is all about the hard rules of execution, the things you absolutely have to do for the system to work and actually protect your ad spend. There are really just 3 core principles you have to master. First, always enforce variable isolation. Be ruthless about it. Pick the one thing you think will make the biggest difference, the offer, the headline, the main image, and test only that. Second, always stage the budget. Define that test budget as your cost of learning, and make sure it's a number you're actually okay with losing. And third, and honestly, this is the hardest one for everybody, wait for significance. You have to learn to trust the science and not your gut instinct about how things are going early on. This point is so important, it needs its own slide. You can never, ever pause an ad that looks like it's losing or scale an ad that looks like it's winning based on early data. The first few hours, or even the first few days of a test, are mostly just random statistical noise. It's like flipping a coin. If you get heads 3 times in a row, you haven't proven it's a 2-headed coin. An ad might look like a superstar on day 1 and then completely fall flat by day 3. If you scale up based on that early noise, you're just throwing away that protected budget. You have to have the discipline to wait until the test has enough data to be statistically significant before you touch anything. And that brings us to our final section, and it's maybe the biggest mindset shift of all. We really need to stop thinking about testing as a risk and start seeing it for what it really is, a financial safeguard. At the end of the day, the real magic of the system is that it understands a human problem. Fear prevents scale. The fear of losing money, the fear of being wrong, it holds us back. By systematically taking financial risk off the table with variable isolation and budget staging, the framework gets rid of that fear. It gives you and your team permission to be bold, It lets you test those big game-changing ideas because the worst-case scenario is always small and manageable. And then when you find that winner, you can scale it hard and fast with 100% confidence because you know the decision is backed by real, valid data. And this whole approach just leads to better marketing. When you're not afraid to fail on a small scale, you can actually focus on discovering what your audience truly values. The best marketing isn't about pushing people through a funnel. It's about pulling them in with a message that really connects. This framework lets you do that because it makes disciplined, rigorous testing the absolute safest, most responsible, and most profitable thing you can possibly do with your budget. So I'll leave you with a question to think about. Take a hard look at your own process for testing new ads. Is it a high-stakes gamble that's driven by hope and gut feelings? Or is it a disciplined, scientific system designed to protect your money and guarantee you only scale the winners? The choice between being the gambler and the scientist, well, that's entirely up to you.